So good afternoon, friends. So today I'll be talking on this topic, atypical pneumonia. This talk is mainly on Mycoplasma pneumonia. So this talk I gave as a part of the discussion that we had on 5th of June 2020. So the background of this is atypical pneumonias are one of the common sort of an organisms that tend to cause pneumonia in community acquired setting. And the key aspect of atypical pneumonia is it is very difficult to establish the diagnosis with an identifiable organism because these are not picked up in our routine gram staining techniques, and culture also will not be able to yield this organism. So it is a situation where identification of organism with conventional culture methods become difficult. And the most common organisms causing atypical pneumonia are Mycoplasma pneumonia, Chlamydia, and Legionella pneumophila. And the key hallmark of atypical pneumonia is extrapulmonary manifestations are a lot more predominant than the respiratory manifestations. So the constitutional symptoms, like it could be fatigue, body aches, arthralgia, myalgia, or any other organ dysfunction, they appear to be more predominant than pure respiratory sort of a symptoms. And as I mentioned, so the extra pulmonary manifestation appears to be more common than the pulmonary manifestations. So that appears to be the typical hallmark of these infections. And atypical pneumonias not only is caused by these atypical bugs, so any pneumonia caused by viral infections like COVID or H1N1, so all these come under atypical category. And if it is an immunocompromised patients, then the fungal pneumonias also come under the category of atypical pneumonia. So the questions, since this was a sort of a poll questionnaire, sort of a discussion. So the question I would have asked the audience is, how do you diagnose atypical pneumonia? So these are the options: clinical history, chest X-ray, lab studies, molecular testing, and serology. So as I said, the clinical history can be quite vague, and X-ray can present with reticulonodular shadows or consolidation, or it can be varied sort of a presentation. And lab studies, most of the lab studies which I'll talk about are fairly non-specific for this. So the only way we can pinpoint the organisms would be with your molecular testing. Or serology has some role, although the false positives or the specificity can be pretty low with serology. So we'll talk about that later. So molecular testing is the way to identify these atypical species. So in this particular talk, we'll be talking only on the Mycoplasma pneumonia. So this is how morphologically the Mycoplasma pneumonia looks. As you see, it is of varied shapes, and it is considered as one amongst the smallest free living organisms. So it's pretty small, and the shape and size can be quite variable. So it doesn't have a rigid cell wall, and as I mentioned, so the size and shape of it is quite variable. So it doesn't have any specific morphology which can be identifiable or recognizable. And the key hallmark of Mycoplasma is it is resistant to beta-lactam antibiotics. So this is where any community-acquired pneumonia, we give beta-lactam antibiotics along with macrolides to cover for atypical organisms. And the good thing about these bugs is they are very sensitive to macrolides, and predominantly they affect the respiratory tract. So the Mycoplasma has a propensity to predominantly affect the lung and the airways. And another hallmark is, since it is one amongst the smallest free living organisms, so the spread can happen by droplets or by with aerosol also. So it is like COVID. Like COVID spreads with aerosol and droplets. So Mycoplasma also has ability to spread through aerosol and through droplets. So what is the pathogenesis of Mycoplasma? See, Mycoplasma produces a toxin called community acquired respiratory distress syndrome toxin. So this is the toxin they have identified, and this toxin causes inflammation in the bronchi and in the lung tissue. So this is the toxin which predominantly has an inflammatory effect on the lungs and the airways, on the bronchi. And another interesting aspect about Mycoplasma, which was interesting, is these Mycoplasma go and attach themselves to the respiratory epithelial cells. So if you look at this as a respiratory epithelial cell wall, so it goes and gets adhered to the respiratory epithelium. And not only it gets adhered, once it gets adhered, there is a process of endocytosis that happens. And these mycoplasma enter into the cells and they go sit inside the epithelium, respiratory epithelium cells. So it goes and sits within the cells by a process of endocytosis. And that is what makes this organism to have a latent infection. So which means it may be present in a patient for a very long time before the manifestation occurs, when there is a breach in any of these barriers that happens due to whatever reason. So it is characteristically identified as causing latent or chronic disease state because of its ability to get into the cells with endocytosis. And because it sits within the cells, the typical cellular and humoral response you see in an individual after a bug enters is something that we would not see with mycoplasma because of its ability to be residing within the cell. And because it sits within the cell, so the effectiveness of antibiotics also can be troubled. So it can interfere with the action of these drugs. So when you talk about clinical manifestations, 0 to 50% of them who get infected with mycoplasma, because as I said, it can remain as a chronic disease state or a latent state, they can remain asymptomatic up to 50%. And although they're asymptomatic, they may manifest after few weeks to months once there has been a breach in your defense mechanism. So that is when this infection can tend to manifest, and the median duration for it to manifest can be anywhere up to 7 weeks. So which means you may be affected with mycoplasma very early on, but it may be residing within the cells, but the clinical manifestations may manifest much later when there has been a breach in any of these defense mechanisms. And the respiratory symptoms are typically upper respiratory tract symptoms, and bronchitis is a very common way they present. So they present with a lot of cough and bronchitis symptoms, and small percentage, 3 to 10%, can present with pneumonia, lobar pneumonia. So that is the typical clinical. But as I have reiterated and re-emphasized, the extra pulmonary manifestations of these atypical pneumonia is a hallmark feature. So what are the extra pulmonary features? So it can cause encephalitis, meningitis. So it can cause encephalopathy. So it can affect the uh, central nervous system tissue, and it can cause hemolysis. Hemolysis is one of the characteristic feature of mycoplasma, and it can cause skin rashes. So it can cause varied type of skin rashes, maculopapular rashes. So skin manifestations also are common. It can cause arthralgia, and with the heart it is reported to cause pericarditis, endocarditis, myocarditis, or it can cause even conduction defects. So mycoplasma has been reported to cause conduction defects and cardiac thrombi as well. So these are some of the cardiac, and it can cause mild hepatitis also. So these patients can manifest with mild icterus also. So this is the pictorial representation of extrapulmonary manifestation. It can involve CNS, cardiac, liver, and skin, and it can cause other symptoms like arthralgia. So these are ones which are commonly reported as extrapulmonary manifestations. So how do we diagnose? Because as I've already said, hemolysis seems to be very typical in mycoplasma. Because there is hemolysis, they may present with little lower hemoglobin. And because there is ongoing hemolysis, their unconjugated bilirubin will go up, LDH will be high, and retic count also will be high. And because there is hemolysis, DCT, direct Coombs test, will be positive. And if you remember, we do this test called cold agglutinin to look as a surrogate marker for this infection. And we used to do it in our hospital, but right now we have stopped doing this because it is extremely non-specific. So cold agglutinins can come positive. Hmm. And chest X-ray shows typical reticulonodular shadows, and this could be bilateral. So it can present with fluffy opacities or reticulonodular shadows bilaterally, and then they may progress to ARDS also in some situations, or it can present with unilateral or bilateral consolidation. So it can present in a varied way. It can be very nebulous like this with vague shadows, or it can present with a lobar, unilateral or bilateral lobar consolidation. So when you talk about molecular testing, which is called NAT, nucleic acid amplification test, which you typically do with PCR, sensitivity is only 40%, but specificity is very good. It's 98% to identify these tests. So proportion of patients who are positive and detected by the test, so it's pretty good. But the problem with PCR or nucleic acid amplification test is it will say that patient has had an infection, but it is very hard for us to ascertain whether it is an acute infection or whether it is a co-infection, where so it wouldn't rule out the presence of other infections. It could be other bacteria which may be coexist, or it may not be able to identify asymptomatic, so it wouldn't delineate between any of these uh, manifestations that mycoplasma can present. So when you look at serology, the high titers of IgM is shown to have low specificity. So this is what at the outset I mentioned. So if you look at PCR, specificity is very high. So proportion of patients who have the disease identified who are positive for the test is good, but with serology it is low specificity. So that is the pitfall of serology. But fourfold increase in IgG indicates that they are in a recovery or a convalescence phase. And studies have shown that serology may not be the good way of identifying mycoplasma. So the only test that we could possibly rely on to identify or confirm mycoplasma would be PCR based techniques. So now the question I would have asked for the audience is, what will be your choice of antibiotics for atypical pneumonia? I think that as you see, all the four choices given are effective against atypical, but our first choice would always be macrolides because of it has immunomodulant effect, and fairly there is a good sensitivity of these organisms to macrolides. And but if the resistance to macrolides is found to be high in any geographic location, then doxycycline is something one could consider. But fluoroquinolone would be the last choice because we would wish to reserve this drug, especially in a country like India, for tuberculosis patients, for MDR tuberculosis, because quinolones is a good choice for tuberculosis patient as a second line of drug. So, so our first choice would always be macrolides. So as I mentioned, the first line treatment would be macrolides. It could be either clarithromycin or azithromycin, followed by doxycycline. And if both for some reason cannot be given due to drug reaction or something of that nature, fluoroquinolones can be considered. So as I mentioned, in regions where the resistance occurrence or resistance prevalence is very low, where it is less than 20%, macrolides will always be the first choice of drug. So if you use clarithromycin, it's 500 mg twice daily for 10 days. If it's azithromycin, 500 mg every day for 3 to 5 days. So where there is macrolide resistance more than 20%, doxycycline becomes the second choice, followed by fluoroquinolones. You could use levofloxacin 500 mg once daily or moxifloxacin 400 mg once daily. So these are the drugs, and these are the guidelines that has come out from this Japanese society. Okay. So now the question is, would empiric coverage in CAP with for atypical mandatory? Yes, it is required. So for any community acquired pneumonia, it is imperative that we give combination of beta-lactam antibiotics along with macrolide or atypical coverage because of high incidence of infection by atypical organisms. And we have understood that mycoplasma can be residing within the cells even if you have a bacterial infection. So it would possibly precipitate them to manifest with atypical infection because of the latent nature of this disease manifestation, which means the organisms can be sitting within the respiratory epithelium and it could manifest. So there is a high rates of colonization. And another reason why we cover with atypical coverage is it is very difficult to grow these organisms on culture media. So there is no way we can establish the diagnosis. We have to rely on PCR based techniques to identify these organisms. And the reason why we cover with a simple macrolide is otherwise these drugs are resistant to any beta lactam antibiotics which you would ordinarily give to community acquired pneumonia caused by strep pneumonia. So because they are resistant, we need to add in a macrolide for all community acquired pneumonia. And good thing about this mycoplasma is it responds well to macrolides, tetracyclines and fluoroquinolones. So in summary, so in COVID season, so nothing should prevent us from suspecting the occurrence of atypical pneumonia. And even if you look at the COVID literature, the use of macrolides is suggested along with hydroxychloroquine because of good synergy between HCQ and macrolides. If you have to subscribe to the French trial which initially came, because when we gave HCQ with macrolides, the viral clearance happened much better. And another unique nature of this mycoplasma is it did not have any risk factors. So it's not like this atypical pneumonia occurs only in patients with risk factor. It can occur in anyone. So that also becomes an important reason why we have to consider atypical pneumonia. And as I said, it is difficult to recognize this condition unless with high index of suspicion. So it becomes mandatory that all community acquired pneumonias are covered with atypical coverage. And the good thing is clinical response is good once you treat them with atypical cover. And it becomes challenging when other diagnoses may coexist. And as I re-emphasize, PCR based diagnostic technology seems to be the way to identify this disease. But the limitation of this is it won't identify whether it is a co-infection is existing or active infection, or whether it is asymptomatic. It won't tell you that. So that is another important limitations. But when that is the case, you need to put in your clinical discretion. If patient come with predominant extrapulmonary features, or atypical presentation with LDH being high, so if you have done say Coombs test and if they are mildly icteric, so high index of suspicion is what will lead you to consider that there is possibly atypical nature. And some of these patients can come with diarrheal symptoms also, especially Legionella. So since we are talking about mycoplasma, you need to just keep that hemolysis in back of mind. So if a pneumonia patient comes with a count which is not very high and shows some features of hemolysis, so this should come high in our list of understanding. So if your LDH is high, or if you have a mild icterus with bilirubin being high in a pneumonia, so you would suspect possibly there may be underlying mycoplasma which is causing this. So thank you very much. So this is a cartoon which I'm sure many of you would have seen. So this is very much applicable right now. So you can rehear to this lecture on, you can visit my website www.drpradeeprangapat.com and rehear to this lecture to gain insight and clarity. Thank you.